You're listening to The Lisa Wentz Show. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled to have you. Let's get started. Today's guest is Caroline Goyder. She is one of London's most prestigious public speaking coaches. She served as professor of voice and speech for over a decade at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. She has authored 3 books: Gravitas, Communicate with Confidence, Influence, and Authority, Star Qualities, and Find Your Voice, released in January 2020. Her 2014 TEDx talk, The Surprising Secret to Speaking with Confidence, has been viewed over 8.3 million times. She is often making media appearances and has been featured in dozens of national magazines. It is an honor to have you here today. Welcome, Caroline.
Oh, it's an honor to be here, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, this is a special treat for me. I've been doing quite a lot of interviews, but I haven't interviewed a public speaking coach or somebody who does the work similar to me. So now I get to ask you all the questions that people ask me, and I'm excited about that.
We can nerd out a little bit.
So I want to know right away, what types of clients seek you out typically, or is there a typical?
Gosh. Well, yes, it's funny. So, tiny bit of backstory. I fell into this work because when I left university and arrived at drama school, they said, you're in your head. And I had to get out of my head and into my body, which is something we can probably unpick more. I tend to work with people who have done very well in their lives because they're good at the thinking stuff and suddenly find that they have to communicate on a bigger scale. And often that means getting them more into their body. So I am the classic teach what you need teacher. That's me.
And as far as I want to touch on what you just said, getting out of your head and into your body, just because that's something that in drama school I heard as well, not just towards me, but other people. And I'm wondering if it's has the same meaning in London as it does in California. For us, it means anticipating of the next thought you're about to express, or being too much in your head, thinking things through, and that kind of thing. Is that what you meant by that?
Yes. I mean, I think it covers a multitude of sins. It means that to me. And I think it also means, which I think you said actually, that thing of working out the world through your brain solely, when we can kind of get stuck in a story that we tell ourselves. Whereas when we are reading the world through our senses, kind of feeling our way through the world, actually, often we get truer feedback. And for me, I think it really means being tuned into my senses, my breath, my body, and not just me working out the world through the narrow confines of my brain. So I think we are broadly on the same page on that.
Mm-hmm. And so when you have a client that comes to you and maybe, with this type of work, are you teaching them breathing technique, resonance, articulation techniques?
Yes. I mean, I think like you, because I know you've got an Alexander background, I think it all starts with finding a sense of ease and presence and fluidity in the body. And my belief with voice is that when you find that, a lot of the other things start to untangle. So I tend to start with, I say this, I'm always learning this myself too. I feel like I'm a perpetual student, but I'm always unpicking with students in my classes how they hold themselves, how they breathe, and then how that feeds into how they voice themselves.
Mm-hmm. I just want to clarify what you said, just so our audience, because it's a little esoteric, I want the audience to understand. When Caroline just said Alexander background, I have a certification in Alexander technique, which some people would consider the blueprint for all modern day voice work. So I just wanted to let the audience know what that was so that it's easy and accessible for them. So moving back over to you, when you have a client come to you, and you start to spot that they have some false beliefs about themselves. They come in and they might say, I'm a bad speaker, or I know I can never be good at this, or things like that. I consider that a false belief. I don't know how you would articulate those things, but do you get those clients? And if so, do you address it?
Oh, yes. And belief is huge, isn't it? Now, alongside my voice training, I trained in Neuro Linguistic Programming way back when. And Neuro Linguistic Programming taught me something really interesting, which is modeling. And modeling is the idea that if we want to learn something, the best thing to do is look at people who do it really well. So if you want to learn how to be a musician, model Mozart. But the piece that NLP really taught me is that we can model ourselves. So when someone tells me, I hate public speaking, I'm a terrible speaker, what I would want to model is where in their life they do feel confident. So I had a lovely client who actually works in the management side of theatre. I won't name him or where he works. And he was getting very nervous about a big public presentation. And so we looked at where he feels himself and confident, and he feels himself and confident with his team. So we modeled the breadth of those meetings and the presence of those meetings, and then kind of transferred the file to these big, public, visible presentations. And I think when someone models out their own success in their own life and they transfer it, then often those beliefs start to dissolve because they're locked in a past you that isn't really true anymore.
Mm-hmm. So could you do us a favor, if possible, and it may be just me, maybe I'm the one who needs it. Can you go deeper into what you mean by model?
Oh, gosh. So, I mean, this is a whole field in NLP. So the first thing I would say to people is if you're curious about modeling, just Google Neuro Linguistic Programming and modeling. But in a nutshell, it's the idea that you can unpick someone else's strategies. So I'll give you a really good voice example. When I did my NLP Master Practitioner, one of the people I modeled was Barbara Houseman, who I know you know because she's a brilliant voice teacher. And I was looking at how voice teachers do what they do. And one of the things Barbara said was that she makes a visual interpretation. I mean, I'm going back 20 years, so I'm probably slightly paraphrasing her.
No
so
worries.
She'll have to forgive me. But I modeled out that she made a visual picture of where she wanted the client to be before the client, made that progress. And then she worked towards that visual picture. So that's the kind of thing that if you ask someone, how do you do what you do? How is it that when you're working with a client, you know where to move them to? They might say, well, I get a picture. And then you can unpick what that picture is like and how they represent that. And it cooks down into a sequence of sensory representation, like an equation. And we're now getting a bit deep into NLP, but it's really worth Googling. And it's a wonderful way to unpick what someone is doing.
It's interesting. It's interesting, and I find it a little bit challenging, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you why. As much respect I have for you, and I'm listening, I'm hearing what you're saying, I've had a lot of, or enough, negative experiences with people who are certified. And what I have noticed, and it could be partially cultural, although you're saying, yeah. So we'll get to that, in a second. What I've noticed with people who go into NLP and business coaching, I feel like it attracts people who are manipulative. And they're looking for ways in to read people quickly and manipulate them. And there's a lack of honesty that comes across. It's a tool that I think people use that that haven't developed other skills.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? What I've noticed is that NLP the training has been used by a lot of people who go into business coaching, and their coaching tends to be a little bit superficial. It comes across to me as if they use these skills in order to sort of manipulate, sort of get what they want from someone without really offering a lot in return. That has been my experience. But that's not to say that somebody who has a vast skill set and who was also trained in NLP cannot use it for a greater good or for the clients to get what they need. Does this make sense, Carolyn?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a tool like anything else, isn't it? It's like a knife you can cut a birthday cake with or do something nefarious. And NLP, a little NLP is a dangerous thing, and I did quite a lot of it in a 10-year period, and I trained with people like Judy Delosier and Robert Dilts, who are really at the top of their field, and like the good voice people, carry it very lightly. And I think it's a wonderful instrument, it's a wonderful tool, but you do have to make sure that you are clear on your purpose and that you use it to serve someone rather than to get them to do something.
Mm. So that's one tool. Those are some tools you use. Is there anything else that you do? For me, I tend to go, because my background is also in psychology, I don't go into psychoanalysis, heavy psychoanalysis or therapy with a client. I absolutely don't want to do that. But I come through that lens a little bit when I see somebody is really struggling. And I also do try to get them into their body. Anything else that you use as a technique or advice you would like to give somebody who's listening right now who is feeling a little bit stuck? Like, I feel like I'm stuck because I'll never be the speaker my brother is, or my father was, or my boss is, or these kinds of false beliefs. Any piece of advice you'd like to send out to our listeners in this area?
So if you're someone struggling with those beliefs that I'm not a good speaker or I feel nervous about speaking, I would say to you that it is very habitual, that the patterns that we have around speaking are just learnt behaviors. And if you want to learn to speak well, really, the first thing to do is a bit Alexander in a way, in that Alexander noticed that he had a pattern that wasn't serving him and started to unpick it. I'd say to you, if you can bear it, get yourself on camera. Record your voice on voice notes. And with a really generous, supportive spirit, as if you were listening to a friend speaking, give yourself a few things that you want to celebrate. And then start to think, what do I want to refine? And often it's things like I'm speaking too fast, or I'm saying or my voice isn't rich enough. And just start with the things that you can practice yourself. And then seek out someone like Lisa, seek out a drama school, seek out an online course, because there's so much good stuff online now. And start to unpick the habits that maybe you can't unpick on your own. And if you do that over a period of about 6 months to a year, it's amazing how your voice, your speech can change. And I'm always really keen to say to people, you can be your own coach if you listen to yourself, if you record yourself.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful advice. I have a lot of is similar, especially the audio recording, so that people can hear not just their voice, but what they're saying as opposed to what they thought they said in a speech
Exactly.
or in a meeting or something like that. And also just to put another piece of the puzzle onto what you just said, because we're talking about false beliefs and talking about limiting beliefs, to make sure that when you listen to it, like you said, with a generous heart, that any critic it moves out of the room, meaning your own critic. That critiquing is very different from criticizing. Critiquing gives us something to work with. Criticizing ourselves stops us from growing and working. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. And I think also, make sure that you've had some food, that you've had a relaxing day, that you do it at a time when you're not hangry. Because there are times in our life where we are really mean to ourselves. And I think that's universal. And it's making sure that when you are giving yourself some, kind feedback, that you're in the right place to do it. And I think we need to judge that in ourselves.
Mm. What is your favorite aspect of what you do in terms of coaching?
Oh, I mean, I love all of it. I was a very unhappy drama teacher for years. Well, not very unhappy, that's a bit dramatic. But when I found voice coaching, I just kind of felt like it wasn't working anymore. So I think the truth is I love all of it. The bit that I love takes me back to the moment when I had the light bulb moment, when I realized that you could get out of your head. I love watching people go, oh, this is easier than I thought. And I love that moment when they realize they find the growth mindset that they can do this. I just love that moment. It never gets old.
Excellent. And I want to talk a little bit about, you've written 3 books now, and I have been recommending Gravitas for years now. I think it's a wonderful book. They all are, but this one speaks to me in a certain way. And I love the part, I want to have a little fun now. I love the part in Gravitas where you analyze iconic speakers and their types. There seem to be 4 archetypes that you point out in terms of speaking styles or the effects that we have on the listeners and that kind of thing. Can you speak to that for a moment?
Sure. It's funny, today I was running a session for they're a green investment fund, and we were talking about this very issue. It's probably worth laying out the archetypes, isn't it? We were talking about blue, which is that very regal, objective, Barack Obama style of speaker. Or for a woman, it would be someone like Christine Lagarde, the head of the IMF, or possibly Hillary Clinton had quite a kind of blue regal style, has. Then there's red, which is that very dynamic, punchy. I mean, you're in San Francisco, it's that kind of Silicon Valley driving energy. And those speakers are the more kind of Tony Robbins end of things, or Marie Forleo, those very punchy, drivey people who make you feel very energized when you listen to them. And then there's the greens, who are very warm and caring and soft, and they make you just feel very warm and supported. And those speakers are the more kind of Tara Brach or Brené Brown. They're often female, but it's a shame because there is some really good male ones. David Attenborough has quite a lot of that lovely, warm green energy. And then there's the last category, which I love, which is the yellow, which is that real visionary, strategic, exciting Martin Luther King energy, someone who can paint incredible pictures for you in words and really lift you. Now, in this conversation with this investment fund, they are massively green. It's lovely. And they care deeply about what they're doing, but they're going up in front of tech startups who are really, and I know you probably work with a few of them, Lisa, really high red, yellow. And so the conversation we had is, it's not enough to be your lovely, warm, relaxed, friendly self in these conversations. Actually, you might want to stand up for this call. You might want to have some punchy gestures which give you more of a staccato energy. You might want to make sure that you're on your right big toe when you speak, so you sound really physically engaged. And when we match the energy of someone who has that, say, red style of speaking, we make them feel comfortable with us. And then we start to create a relaxed, easy rapport. We start to dance with them a little bit, metaphorically. So yeah, I love, that was a long answer, but they are so fun to play with vocally. I love them.
No, I love it. I don't think the answer was, it's going to get longer because I'm going to keep asking questions. One question I have is, so the way that I sometimes will talk to a client about being able to branch out from their more habitual or style, let's just say it's a style, just to branch out a little bit, is one of the first things they'll say is, I don't want to lose my authenticity.
Yeah.
So, and I know you don't want that either. I don't want that either. So how do we communicate to someone, you want to have different colors on your palette that you can choose from, different energies and whatnot to suit the audience, to suit the situation, to suit, even if it's just a one-on-one, without losing your authenticity? Does it seem like when you get that sort of fear-based feedback, or if you get that fear-based feedback, is it pretty easy to shift people into a place of confidence?
Gosh, yes. So I love this idea of a palette of colors, and I think that's absolutely the way to look at it. And one of the things I will say to people, say you want to find more red energy, that real driving warrior energy. By the way, that's not what I'm always saying to people. I equally will tell people all the time that they need to find more green. But say we are saying to someone, you need to be more dynamic so you can speak to these startup founders. I'd say to them, where in your life are you dynamic? So one of the things I said to someone today, and this is modeling yourself, is, do you play any sport? And he said, yeah, I play tennis. I said, so how do you carry yourself when you're playing tennis? And so he stands up really straight and his core is engaged. And there's a sense that he's really in his pelvis and his back and his shoulders. His whole body is speaking. And suddenly he's in red. So if someone equally was very high task, very blue, objective, and very red, very dynamic, and they needed to be softer, which so many people do right now because they needed to engage people on a big town hall, or they need to talk to someone one-to-one, I'd say, where in your life do you access a sense of, connection and warmth? What are you like when you're with your friends having a drink? And I'd say, can you bring that to this speech or this presentation? And suddenly that warmth comes through because it's there. They just haven't given themselves permission to use it at work. So often it's modeling out, where do you have those qualities in other parts of your life? People find it very quickly.
And so if you were going to say, okay, this is my style, what's yours, Carolyn? I mean, you speak a lot, so do you have a particular color?
When I've done, because this comes from insights, I mean, it's Jungian, isn't it? So you can parse this lots of different ways. But when I talk about the colors, I'm really talking about insights. When I do insights questionnaires or DISC questionnaires, I come out high red, which is the right-hand column, quite high dynamic, with quite a lot of the yellow vision pattern as well. So I fit that kind of founder, ad agency pattern. But I do wonder if in my old age I'm becoming a bit more green. I think probably I don't have masses of blue.
In your old age? Come on. Come on now. You're not in your old age yet, but we'll forgive that. That's okay.
Older.
So that's right. I remember taking a DISC assessment. I came out as the producer, and I think that was a red. But I don't really remember, and I don't tend to speak that way when I'm speaking professionally and or giving a talk. I tend to come across, I come across as a teacher, frankly. I think I do. I come across with more warmth than anywhere else in my life, which I don't know. Interesting. But again, I'm just curious. Moving on into, I really want to be able to analyze a little bit and just talk about favorites. Who are your historical favorites? Or do you have any? You might not have any. I have some, so maybe I'm projecting here. But are there speakers that you have seen that really, really move you, that you really feel inspired by?
So I saw Malala speak live when she was maybe 16. And I have to say, in her quiet way, she blew me away. So she's someone. Brené Brown, I love Brené. I've mentioned her name already. I love her authenticity and her strength in femininity and her down home honesty. I think she's a really good speaker.
That's interesting. The couple things I think are interesting there. Number one, Malalia, is that how we say her name? I'm forgetting.
Malala, I think,
Malala.
But I mean, I could be wrong. I'm no expert.
Yeah, no. One of the things that I love about that answer is, and I'm not sure if you get this, I get this from women who say, I'm soft-spoken, I don't think that I have much authority or power because of that. Now, usually I give them the example of Jane Goodall as having immense amount of authority and power and still being very soft-spoken, so to speak.
Yes, wonderful example. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think your example is wonderful as well because, again, we want to be authentic. We want to be who we are. And I don't like the idea that some people say, well, you have to be this in order to be an influential, powerful speaker. I think that this is usually a more masculine, I guess probably what you would consider red quality to it. But that's sort of a side note. But for those listeners out there, the people who think, well, I'm kind of introverted, or I'm kind of on the quieter side, or I have a more feminine voice, none of that equals lack of power.
No, and I just love this idea that we find our own style. And I think if COVID has done one good thing, it's slightly blown out of the water that old model of people striding around stages shouting loudly, because I think A, we're not going to be back on those stages for a while, and B, I think that world has slightly gone. So I think there is a a real space for the introverts to step up and speak now, which is wonderful.
Yeah. That's something interesting about the Brene Brown. Her content I love, and I read her content. I don't like listening to her speak much, and I'm going to tell you why. She has an immense amount of vocal fry, and
That's true.
being from
Yeah.
California and having to deal with my own vocal fry and having to overcome that and work with it, I think that it slightly triggers me more than probably the average listener. No, I'm serious. It does, because it was such a, I mean, at the central school when I went there, it was hyper focus thing for me to work on that they wanted me to work on.
Wow.
And now I'm even
Yeah.
becoming self-conscious of it as I'm speaking to you. Okay, I'm
Gosh,
going to bring in some more
that's a
breath.
fascinating filter to listen to it with. Yeah. Yeah, I'll listen to her differently now.
Oh, sorry about that.
Don't worry.
So let's talk. Let's talk a little bit about. Again, I'd love to give the audience some good advice, which you've already done quite a bit of. But what do you think about giving? I've been thinking a lot lately about everybody has one speech that they can give, maybe more than one, but at least one speech that they can give that no one else can, in a way, because it's through their lens, their life experience, and so on. If you were, let's say, teaching a webinar on something like that, what would be maybe your four must-haves to deliver that one speech that is maybe your most important speech?
Do you know, I'm a big believer in citing experts when you are using their work. And when you ask me this question, the person who I cite is a US speaker coach. I mean, not a million miles away from you, I think, Casey Baker, because I have learned a lot from her about pulling together that real keynote speech. And her thing, which I love, it's a brilliant exercise, is to write down on a piece of paper 5 sentence stems, I believe. Write those 5 I believes down, and then think about the ballpark of your talk. Maybe there's a title, maybe there's an audience, and write down what 5 things you believe about this subject, and then speak those beliefs. And what starts to emerge is something that you are really that makes you come alive, that makes you resonant, that makes you fired up. If you can find that driving belief, then start to think about what's the problem the audience are struggling with around that belief. So it might be, if I go back to my TED talk, I use this structure. I believe that everybody can learn to be a good speaker. The problem space for the audience was that they were fearful of public speaking, because most people are. I mean, we know that. So then, once you've got the belief and you've got the pain space, then think about, if you stood and said to a friend, remember this, what would you say? And again, this is all Casey Baker, so she is well worth checking out. And if you say to them, remember this, and you have that advice, then that advice becomes the key pillars of your talk. And so that I believe, audience pain, remember this, is a really good brainstorm place to start to cook up a good speech. It works like a dream.
Wonderful. And what about stepping on to the stage? I know that you said, look, maybe a while before we have live audiences. I'm paraphrasing here, of course. And I think most people have come to that acceptance. Like, we're not going to have in-person large conferences for a while, and TED Talk audiences might be sparse once, if and when they get back on stage, and so forth. But going up to the stage, going up to that moment, which can be nerve-wracking for anyone, and even really seasoned speakers, one or two pieces of advice or thoughts you'd like to give to people?
Yeah, it's funny, I miss that moment. It's so when I learnt to act, I was terrified of that moment. I remember the fear of standing, backstage waiting to go on, and it was like an oppressive, moment of hell's mouth opening, I think is what my drama school teacher called it. And now I've learned to turn that feeling of fear into a feeling of excitement. I miss it. And the thing that shifts it from fear to excitement is, firstly, doing the rehearsal. So make sure you know what you're going to say, make sure your lines are clear, make sure you know how to start. But then also really calm your body. Treat your body like it's a nervous animal, and do something in the day that will calm you down. So for me, it's always been yoga. At the moment, it's qigong. For someone else, it might be going for a walk. It could be lying on the floor and doing semi-supine with your knees up and your breath work. It could just be sitting still on a chair and feeling your in-breath come in for 4 and your out-breath go out for 6. But anything you can do to get your body and breath calm, parasympathetic nervous system stuff rather than sympathetic fight or flight, will mean that when you meet that moment, your body goes, I'm safe. And when your body feels safe, it's exciting. And I would love everybody to know how simple that can be when you steward your nervous system. And I really do think anybody can learn that. It's just practice.
I agree with you on the anybody can learn that. And just through my own lens, I want to add on to that we, and this is a little Alexander technique based, as you're going to know as soon as I say it, that we function as a whole, that we cannot ignore one part of who we are in that sense, that the intellectual side, the emotional side, and the physical side, we function as a whole and we change as a whole. And when we're well connected in these areas, then yes, I think it's much easier to do anything in life, but to step on the stage, much, much easier.
And I have to say that it was Alexander technique that I remember the first Alexander technique session I had after I'd done the Voice Masters, and I walked away with a kind of whoa, because it was that feeling of integration, which brings us back to brain and body. If you want to be a good speaker, I think Alexander technique is, for anybody, a really wonderful thing to explore. It's really powerful.
To come into the home stretch of this conversation, which has been lovely for me, so I can't thank you enough for showing up today and being able to offer so much expert advice and tangible advice to our listeners today. I'm just wondering if there's anything else that you wanted to say or contribute, or any thoughts you have for our audience before we sign off.
I've loved talking, Lisa, and I suppose that the one thing that I'm really playing with at the moment is screens, because so much of what we're doing right now and for the next few months is screens based. And what I would say to people is that screens really are quite 2D, aren't they? We used to use them for emails and watching films, and suddenly we're using them to connect and to influence and to engage people. What I would say to people is your voice, its tune, its tone, its pace, its emphasis, that's the way that you reach through a screen and connect with someone. And so just to start to play with the possibilities of your voice is really powerful right now. And we haven't even started to talk about Clubhouse and WhatsApp messages. Voice is coming and voice is powerful. So just, listen to Lisa and learn to use yours better, because it will help you in life.
Yeah. Are you on Clubhouse?
Yes. A tentative toe in the water.
Yeah, me too. For those who don't know, Clubhouse is an app that's kind of hot right now. It's on iPhone only, but it's a lot of, it's voice only, and it's a lot of meetings and a lot of, would you say a platform to learn, to discuss? Something like that.
I've learnt loads from it already. So from my experience of it, there's a lot of shouty selling as well, but there's a lot to learn there, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it does drive home your point of how much the voice in itself can convey without a picture. Yeah. Okay, I think that puts a lovely bow on it. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I just want to, we didn't dive into your last book, Find Your Voice, but I want to remind people that it's out there. I recommend all 3 books. And Carolyn also has a wonderful website with lots of resources. I have about maybe 1/100th of the amount of resources she has. So I would look at her website too if you want some more information or to learn more about her and her work. And can you tell us the website address to go to?
Sure, it's Caroline Goyder, Goyder.com.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks, Lisa. That was fun.